back, our dear viewers, as we have promised at the beginning of our program, that today we are going to talk about success that was achieved in Egypt, and that was announced by many international organizations, and on top of which is the UNCTAD, which hailed the progress made by the Egyptians concerning the economy. And to shed more light about the economic success in Egypt, we are joined here in the studio by Mr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, our economic expert. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Abou-El-Fotouh. Now, several international organizations have announced Egypt's success when it comes to the economic field. Would you shed light on that?
Well, indeed, Egypt has progressed very good in the past couple of years, and as witnessed by several international organizations like the IMF and the UNCTAD, that Egypt is progressing in terms of the macroeconomic indicators. Recently, the UNCTAD released a report that Egypt, the foreign direct investment in Egypt has increased 24% in the first half of this year as opposed to last year, despite the fact that the world FDI dropped globally by 41%, and Egypt is still an attractive place for investment in Africa. There are other macroeconomic indicators that prove that Egypt's economic reform is doing well, like, for example, the inflation rate has dropped to 9%. The inflation rate now is below 10%, as opposed to the highest inflation rate recorded last year, 35%. So all these indicators and international organizations statements provide a very positive view about Egypt's economy.
Doctor, how was Egypt able to achieve them in a relatively short period? We have, of course, witnessed some hardships during the past few years, and thank God we are moving in the right direction on the economic level, and many projects were made and many changes did take place concerning the economic reform program. So what's your take on that, Mr.
Egypt has agreed with IMF to launch short-term economic reform programs in year 2016. Several measures have been agreed with IMF, including floating the Egyptian pounds, liberalization of the Egyptian the exchange market, rationalizing the subsidies, and as well as other measures. The changes in the legislative infrastructure in Egypt, all these together have worked out to produce a suitable environment for investment and dealing with the long-term shortcomings in the Egyptian economy. So we can now see the outcome. Still, yet much has to be done, but the progress so far is very good, and we are on track.
Okay. Sir, the recent report of the International Competitiveness said that Egypt's place has raised 94 out of 140 countries mentioned in the report. Now, how would such an outcome of the report affect the flow of investments to Egypt?
Let me just point out that Egypt rank, which is now 94 out of 140, is a good progress, and previously Egypt ranked 119 in the index. That was in the year 2015. And on the other hand, it ranked 70 in the year 2010. The competitive index report produced by World Economic Forum indicates or highlights the productivity level of the economy, and the productivity level of the economy determines how attractive is or how competitive is the economy for investments. So Egypt has done many steps, including the adopting the economic reform program and changing the investment infrastructures and improved in many criteria as determined by the index.
Yes.
Health, education, transportation, innovation, all these things contributed to the rank of Egypt in the competitive index.
Yes. Mr. Hany, how would the recent findings of such reports increase the trust in the credibility and the ability of the Egyptian economy to move forward?
Generally speaking, investors around the world look at how competitive is the economy and the productivity level, which determines the rates of return obtained by investments. So when Egypt rank high or achieve a high rank in this index, it is a strong message and clear message for investors that Egypt is the right place or a good place for competitive investments. So Egypt takes this index or the outcome of the index very seriously because Egypt knows that all the Egyptian economy, the high-level policymakers know that when Egypt rank high in the index, it is a clear and straightforward message for investors to come and invest, and particularly Egypt still contributes for a higher FDI, foreign direct investment, during the first half of this year.
Yes. Sir, what about the results of establishing the investment funds here in Egypt? What would be the results?
Some of the investment funds, the new, some maybe I can't remember the exact number, encourage entrepreneurship, and there's a Saudi development fund which had a joint venture with Egyptian funds to encourage or acquire startup companies and encourage entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So all these signal important moves for encouraging the investment in Egypt.
Sir, how do you explain the advance of Egypt's ranking when it comes to infrastructure? For as we know that now Egypt occupies the 56th place after being ranked 71 last year.
Some of the mega projects, particularly the national road projects, have contributed to this high rank. The new roads in Egypt, which connects all major cities, industrial zones and trade zones, all these together facilitate the domestic and international trades. So they also there are also some aspects in the telecommunications and the advanced communication system in Egypt, which also contribute to the sub-index of the competitiveness index.
Yeah.
Okay. Sir, how do you see the role of the private sector in providing more job opportunities here in Egypt?
The private sector is a major player in any economy. And in order to be an enabling environment, which is an important pillar in the global competitive index, Egypt needs to encourage more the private sector. And the private sector actually is the right place for generating jobs for the youth and women. And the government, actually, I see that more and more steps are being taken now to enable the private sector to play a more important role in developing the economy.
Sir, how can we actually make the best use of the manpower in Egypt? Of course, we are rich in population and the number of people who are in the appropriate age to work. So how can we use the manpower here in Egypt in order to boost the economy in a proper way?
Yes, especially that this has been utilized by so many countries like India and China, for example, in order to drive the economy forward.
The right term is developing the human capital. People are one of the most worthy capital that any nation should utilize and develop. When I say the human capital, I refer to developing all aspects that contribute to making population productive capital, including enhancement and developments in the education system, the developing of the healthcare in the nation, and providing quality training and education for all levels. So this is very important in order to develop the human capital, which is a real wealth in the nation.
Yes. Relatively speaking, sir, I believe that youth play a very important role in this regard. If we're talking about manpower, youth constitute the majority, of course, of manpower. Egypt has been focusing on the role of youth in various fields, holding youth conferences, international youth conferences, through which such conferences would be like a forum to exchange expertise and ideas and innovation between Egyptian youth and youth from around the world. So if we're talking about Egypt's economy and pushing the economy forward, how do you see the role of youth in this regard, and how we can develop the capabilities of youth?
Youth is the major driver for any development in any nation. Unlike some countries in Europe, which the youth, the segment of the population, the young people are diminishing, getting low. We are here in Egypt, and in certain some economies, we have large segments of people who contribute to the workforce. So youth are very important. We need to pay more attention for developing them in all terms, in education, in health, in technology, so that they will be the driving force for pushing the economy forwards in future.
Yes. Mr. Hany, as we have been talking, the role of the entrepreneurs and the role of the SMEs in developing the economy, because that segment is of great concern to the Egyptian leadership, and we have heard a lot the President and the Minister of Investment talking about the role of the startups and the entrepreneurs and the SMEs in developing the economy and helping the economy to develop more.
SMEs and startups together, they contribute to the progress of the economy. As you know, that SMEs contribute, or actually they represent around 80% of the business activities in Egypt. And the government over the last few years have presented several initiatives to encourage the SME sector to grow. For example, the Central Bank of Egypt has presented 2 initiatives for financing SME sectors, and the initiative centers around allocating around $200 billion as Egyptian pounds for SME finance. So realizing that SMEs are the driving force, Egypt's economy will not flourish unless the right resources and technology and development have been presented adequately to this sector.
Indeed.
Sir, tourism plays a very important role in Egypt's economic development. Until the year 2010, the tourism sector has been providing 12% of Egypt's economy. And since that, there have been turbulences hitting this vital sector to the Egyptian economy. But now, with ongoing attempts to revive the tourism sector, also we heard news today of resuming more flights to various destinations, new destinations, such as Al Alamein and Aswan, and many other destinations that would be provided twice weekly. This is just one attempt to revive tourism here in Egypt. Not to mention exhibitions and various touristic activities to bring it back. Do you think that if Egypt works more on the development of this vital sector to the Egyptian economy, it would make a remarkable difference?
Tourism, among other revenue streams, contribute to the growth of the economy. And as rightfully you said, in a few years back, tourism represented 12% of the nation's revenue in foreign currency, particularly in foreign currency. This year, the first half of this year has witnessed a great improvement in tourism, yet it's not yet back to its previous standards and levels in the last few years before the incident, unfortunate incident of the Russian plane crash in Sinai. But more has to be done, particularly in terms of increasing or encouraging the charter flights, trips to the touristic destinations in Egypt, because this is very crucial.
Indeed, Mr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, our economic expert, thank you very much for being our guest for today.
Thank you very much, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break to talk about women's representation in ancient Egypt, but from an interesting point of view. Stay tuned.